Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by our friends at Madisonville Marine. When you talk about the widest selection of boats in East Tennessee, when you talk about the best prices in East Tennessee, it's a guarantee you're talking about Madisonville Marine. And that goes for not only new boats, but also used boats. If you want to go down there and take a look at their inventory of used boats, they do a tremendous job of fixing anything up that when they get those things in, it looks like a new boat coming out, runs like a new boat coming out. They put a guarantee on there. You're not going to find that anywhere else. Madisonville Marine, folks. Check out madmarine.com to learn more. All right. According to CBSSports.com's Gary Parrish, at 10:30 last night, much to my chagrin as the show was put to bed, UT had contacted some A-list candidates, but the interest was not mutual. So Parrish says they have contacted some A-list candidates. The interest was not mutual. One of those coaches, according to Parrish, and I don't know if he got this from UT or the coach, one of those coaches said he didn't like the look of next year's roster, losing 4 out of 5 players. So now everyone seems to think that Michael White from Louisiana Tech is the guy moving up the list. We'll compare him to the main candidates a bit later, but let's look at Michael White's numbers. Here you go. 37 years old. He's from Florida. Former Ole Miss assistant for a lot of years. Played at Ole Miss. You'd like this. For those Vol fans that demand an up-tempo style or bust, he is an up-tempo guy. He's been at Louisiana Tech for 3 years. And let's face it, what could go wrong when you hire a guy with 3 years experience from Louisiana Tech? But you see his record there, 18-16 his first year, then 27-7, tied for first place in the league, tied for first place last year too at 29-8, didn't make the tournament. So he's got 2 NIT bids there. Jimmy, what are you hearing in terms of the search and Michael White and anything else you might want to share?
I'm hearing he's a very strong target, very high on the list, and I agree with you. I think they've talked to him 2 different times. I talked to somebody that knows his dad, who's Kevin White, the athletic director at Duke, and this person highly endorsed him to Tennessee. I spoke with Buddy Davis, the sports editor of the Ruston Daily Leader for 40 years. He said that the athletic director at Louisiana Tech is scared to death of losing Michael White to Tennessee. I think he'd be a good hire, and when you look at his resume, you won't find anything comparable to a 4-8 record.
True. That's good. That's key. And, and his dad really an AD, but he's not famous. It's not like Vince, so not like Vince Dooley. Let's take a look at his resume, though, because I just want to compare it to the last guy. Is it a white and day difference? I get it, white. You see there's Conzo Martin, his first 3 years. No NCAAs after 3 years, and they hired him, and now Michael White, 3 years, no NCAAs. Michael White has won about 70% of his games. Conzo Martin won about 60. Conzo Martin took over a little bit tougher situation in what was a tougher conference in the Missouri Valley, but you can't argue with the fact that the kid had a quick turnaround The guy had a quick turnaround. But the question to you is, when you look at Conzo, you got 2 stops, 3 years each. You got better at each year. I don't see that. I know everybody. If Michael White's the guy, you're going to have this huge rush to get behind him, and I think that's great. And I hope people do back him. For gosh sakes, back him. But at the same time, if the idea was run Conzo Martin off so we can get a resume that looks the same, I'm not wowed. Doesn't mean he's not going to be the best coach ever hired. But I don't see this huge step up on paper anyway. Am I wrong?
Here's a couple other things about his resume. Born in Florida, went to high school in New Orleans, not only played at Ole Miss, was an assistant coach at Ole Miss, so I think he's got very
SEC
good
knowledge.
Very good yes. SEC ties in this area recruiting-wise. and
Which Conzo didn't have.
Which Conzo didn't have. So
he would see this as a destination job, too.
Okay.
I believe.
All right.
What if Ole Miss calls, though?
No.
No? Okay.
Tennessee's a better job, and he knows it having played there.
I think even an Ole Miss guy would say that.
Here's the thing, though. They talked on Thursday. They talked on Saturday. That tells me you're this close to an offer if one hasn't already been extended. He's not jumping at this, or at least, I would think a guy making $600,000 at Louisiana Tech would have said, yes, me, let's take it. Could this be the Missouri situation? Because Missouri's open too now. If he's smart and if he's on their list, why not make these guys battle? And I haven't seen him on Missouri's list. But your thoughts on his resume? Is it a huge step up from Conzo Martin, or do you think it's a step up because of the things Mike mentioned?
I think it's a bit of a small step up, okay. and in part because of the background that he has. The one thing I don't know, his Dave Hart told Michael White, we really like you, but we got 2 other people we're interviewing first. You remember the David Cutcliffe story?
Yeah, hope that's not what he said.
I don't know what he said.
Hopefully he didn't take a phone call from somebody else in the same room, too, like Doug Dickey once.
Here's just a question. I don't know the answer. I don't know if anybody here knows the answer. Conzo Martin came here a year after being on the NCAA tournament bubble and not making it, and some people were surprised. Then he came here for 2 years, was on the NCAA tournament bubble. 1 year, people were surprised he didn't make it, then he finally does. Were his teams on the bubble at Louisiana Tech these last 2 years when he had that good record? Or was it, wow, you had a really good record, but you didn't play anybody?
They were mentioned as a bubble team this year. They were mentioned as a bubble team this year. I don't recall last year.
I don't know. I assume they did not win their tournament, right?
That's correct. Just like Conzo Martin's
Did
last
Southern
year.
Miss win the tournament?
Yes, and that's who got in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead.
But I wonder how
Okay.
many fans are just going to say, another coach from Louisiana Tech? You know, really? Didn't we learn our lesson first? But you
Well-
can't do that.
Okay, we got to be quick though. Here, Jimmy, this is for you. This is a reminder for everybody. A lot of people, you're right. There's going to be a huge rush to get behind him. There's going to be some people that say, they've gone cheap again. They never go after a big name. That's not true. Another one of these fact things. We're going to kill that myth that Tennessee has never gone after a big name, never been willing to spend the money. People might remember that in 1994, 20 years ago, Doug Dickey went after Roy Williams. It became a national story. It was on ESPN that Tennessee was prepared to pay a then record amount, $1 million a year salary. That was 20 years ago. That was, one of the Kansas writers said that was akin to what the Lakers were chasing Roy Williams with. So that's big dollars that was talked about on ESPN at the time.
They had a good reserve fund back then.
They did have a good reserve fund. Let's take a look at the comments from Roy Williams. This was from '94. I've made the decision that I'm going to stay right here at Kansas. I'm very flattered at Tennessee's interest. I did have contact with people from the University of Tennessee. I appreciate their interest in Roy Williams. I spoke with Doug Dickey even this morning and told him. He was very gracious. I did consider it. I'm not saying it was an easy decision by any means. My favorite school growing up in Asheville was North Carolina. My second favorite school was Tennessee. I worked at Tennessee's camp when it was Ray Mears. I think it's a very attractive program. They have great people to work with. I think Knoxville is a great town. Tennessee would be one of the few places I'd be interested at all because I have a tremendous job at Kansas. He'd only been at Kansas 5 years. He'd been to 2 Final Fours. He'd been there 5 years. Doug Dickey reportedly offering as much as $1 million to go get Roy Williams. And Jimmy, those quotes came from a story you wrote 20 years ago. They've gone after Roy Williams. They've gone after big names with big dollars since. It just hasn't happened.
Well, they have. They went after Rick Barnes. They went after Jamie Dixon. They went after Jay Wright. They went after Bill Self.
Mark Few.
Mark Few they went after.
Dana Altman.
Dana Altman's another one. So they've gone after some big name coaches. They just haven't been able to land them for whatever reason. So I to say it, it kind of reminded me of Tennessee. Somebody said last year, well, Tennessee didn't recruit any quarterbacks. Yeah, they did. They recruited 5. They just didn't get any. So you can't say it didn't recruit them.
Yeah.
They have gone after some big names. They just haven't landed them.
Reading those quotes from Roy Williams about Tennessee, maybe they ought to call him this year.
Oh, and,
He's making less than $2 million at Carolina.
and by the way, I edited that story, so I helped too.
He'll have to. Now, if Williams comes here, though, it's part of the Tennessee deal. He's got to sell some dadgum popcorn. When we come back, we're going to look at all. Let's see who remembers that. When we come back, we're going to take a look at all the candidates very quickly. Come on back on Sports Source.